Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. I apologize about the delay. We had some technical glitches during the login, but we are on now, and everything looks good. And so today we're going to talk about अपना labor code bill. So for those who don't know, labor code bill की announcement हुई है. And basically we're looking at four very specific bills, and their names
Hmm.
are the Code on Wages 2019, the Industrial Relations Code 2020, the Code on Social Security 2020, the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020. Now I'm just sharing a little bit of baseline information, Tushar, so that we don't have to
Yeah,
talk about. Now there is a debate whether there are 29 codes that have been made into one,
29.
some
Yeah.
29 है ना. But this graphic shared says the number of existing acts were 13. Now they have been made one. Sections were 620, they have been made 143. Rules were 866, they've been made 175. Registrations were 6, there is only one registration. There were 4 different licenses, now you need one. There were 55 forms, now there are 20. There were 21 returns, now there is one. So this is as far as the the information of the baseline is concerned. Now other than that, I'm sharing another snippet from the media. So this information shares that statutory minimum wage for all, only 30% establishments wages up to 24K are covered earlier. Longer shifts, night work for women allowed, equal pay for equal work. Gig platform workers recognized for the first time to get social security. Work limit hours 8 to 12 hours in a day, maximum of 48 hours in a week. Gratuity for fixed term employees after 1 year against 5 years now. A single registrations license and return to cut compliance burden, and revised factory thresholds to reduce compliance burden on smaller units. This, ladies and gentlemen, and I say this as someone who ran a small business for the longest time, is going to be the biggest boost to the Indian economy, this particular bit. Um, and unions with 51 percent membership get recognized. No government approval for layoffs at companies with up to 299 employees. The earlier limit was 100. Now I repeat once again, this one, ladies and gentlemen, and the one to the left, compliance burden, I can assure you this is going to fundamentally change the nature of the Indian economy, and this really is amazing. This is my opinion. I am going to read more and more and more and more. And as expected, labor unions have announced a strike that are affiliated with CPI. Badayo.
So as a tribute to the new labor codes that have been notified by the government, Kushal and I have decided to do this podcast at 10 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So this is our tribute, working late hours. And look, the Modi government had a very unique problem facing it when it was designing these labor codes. One, you're summarizing it, sure. But one, you're also factoring in the ease of doing business. Now, the problem in India is, and this any entrepreneur will tell you, that we want to become a manufacturing powerhouse like the Chinese, but the laborers work as if they are Americans and want all American rights. It's a very tricky situation where we are not giving ourselves a reality check. And this also includes the government in a way. You have the aspirations of China, you're looking at the wokeism of America, the work wokeism of America, and in between, you're getting caught in the middle of nowhere. And factoring that uncertainty, factoring that doubt, you come up with these four labor codes that appease to the employer also and the employees also. I think that is the good job. Kushal and I often talk about the boring work the government does, the boring work no one's talking about ever. And guess what? It's true. I was on two television debates on two different national channels, very respected channels, and no one is even discussing the new labor codes, which tells you why these boring things actually move the economy in the long run. Now, within these four codes, Kushal, there is a lot to break down, but let's start with the old laws that have been replaced. Now, the Code on Wages 2019 replaces four laws, Industrial Relations Code replaces three, Code on Social Security, which is where the gig workers will feel they have emerged victorious, is nine laws. And finally, the Health Working Conditions Code is 13 laws. Now, all in all, if you're looking, if someone is saying, okay, this is again too pro labor, we are going back to the socialist era, this has nothing for the employers, they also need to hold their horses. It's not the case. And anyone like the trade unions which are saying that, oh, this will kill the laborers in India, this is again Adani Ambani ki chal, this is all that same old nonsense, they also need to hold their horses. Now, the first question we need to address is its timing. Why after 5 years? 2020 2021 was a great time to understand why some of the best policies require the best communication, because the best policies did not get the best breakdown or communication in the media, and it was a very different time. I mean, believe it or not, 5 years ago we were a very different country. That is the time when these labor laws codes were introduced, they were passed. Next 5 years there's a lot of to and fro, a lot of discussion within the unions and the government, a lot of discussion with the state governments and the center, because a lot of these codes they'll also require formulation of rules by the state governments. Now, if you're looking at gig workers, for instance, a lot of those rules have to be formed by the state governments. And what happened in 2020 21? Some of the state governments, non BJP state governments, non NDA state governments, they rejected it outright, which also includes West Bengal. Right? In 2025, after Bihar, the BJP also has a wonderful cushion where they know that after Haryana, after Maharashtra, after Delhi, which by the way is a huge industrial city as well, and after Bihar, they have the mandate of the people to do with some difficult reforms. Remember, this has been a crazy of reforms. You have the labor codes notified, you have the GST reforms, you have the income tax cut introduced. So this year has been absolutely crazy on the serious reforms front.
Sorry to
But
come in
that
here, but these laws
uh,
are passed in complete
2020.
unison with every single state government.
Yes. All of them are on board because all of
I
them will have
repeat,
to formulate the
every
rules.
single state government was on board in passing these laws. The consultations have been going on for more than 3 years.
Hmm. So there are no major elections also coming up, no major elections until 2027. So even if there is an expected blowback, political blowback, I think the government finds itself in the position to absorb that blowback. Number two, everyone wants to invest in India. We keep hearing about this China plus one strategy. But one thing that deters a lot of investors was the fear of the trade unions. And this you can see everywhere. He's already talking about CPI backed unions announcing a strike. You look at the Foxconn and Wistron plants, even they have underwent this same problem of strikes. So it was very important to retain the trade unions as they are in the Western world, but also dilute the capacity they have to derail an industry or a state altogether. Why I say state, you read up on West Bengal, for instance, what the trade unions did to West Bengal, and all of them backed by communists. You read up on what happened to the Mumbai textile mills in the 1980s, and they never recovered from that. Sure, that led to a new real estate revolution, that's all fine. But they also never recovered, and a lot of people were displaced, a lot of people became unemployed, and that was the end of that story. So you also have to ensure that the trade unions have their rights, but they are not in the position to cripple an entire industry as they have done in the past. I mean, it's done. It's not impossible. That is the point to begin with. This is what political capital gets you. It gets you the license to go ahead with heavy reforms, and 2025 has been about that.
So, two, three things are important
Mm.
in this. Point number one, I again circle back to that one bit where companies see the average size of an MSME in India. Most probably, people don't know this because people have not really done any business in India. So, उनको idea नहीं होता. Most businesses in India will be having employees less than 200. Less than
Hmm.
200 log honge. In fact, what this does is actually will encourage people to formalize more people on their payrolls.
Hmm.
What happens now is a lot of time, a lot of things are just outsourced and people don't like to scale up. Do you know how many companies in India could actually do a lot of things inside their own company? and create better efficiencies, better quality control and a lot of things. But they don't, they're like, अरे मेरा वो roster है ना 50 के ऊपर चल जाएगा, मेरी लग जाएगी, मेरे को नहीं करना है, मैं किसी और
Yeah.
को outsource कर दूंगा मेरा काम. We actively discourage quality manufacturing in India because of our stupid and archaic labor laws. So I'll give you an example. For example, समझ ले मैं एक टेक्सटाइल यार्न डाइंग यूनिट हूं. I will give you textile examples. तो मेरी लेबर की स्ट्रेंथ यार्न डाइंग के लिए समझ ले अराउंड 60 to 70 होगी. मतलब मैं सिर्फ यार्न डाइंग कर रहा हूँ. मगर अगर मुझे यार्न डाइंग के साथ फैब्रिक डाइंग करनी हो, और अभी अगर मेरे को स्कोप अप टू 299 हो गया, तो मैं एक छोटी यूनिट जिसमें गारमेंट वॉशिंग, यार्न डाइंग एंड फैब्रिक डाइंग तीनों कर सकता हूँ. वर्कर्स का काइंड ऑफ ओवरलैप होगा. मेरे को 200 वर्कर नहीं, मेरा तो 150 वर्कर में काम हो जाएगा. और मैं एक वर्सेटाइल बिजनेस बन सकता हूं. मेरे को इकोनॉमीज ऑफ स्केल मिल सकती है. मेरे फ्यूल एफिशिएंसी बढ़ सकती है. फॉर एग्जांपल, आप एक 1 टन का, लेस देन 1 टन का बॉयलर लगाओगे. मैं जैसे आपको बता रहा हूं, अगर आपने उसको 3 टन कर दिया, तो आपकी वो जो इंक्रीज कैलोरिफिक वैल्यू होती है ना, अमाउंट ऑफ स्टीम जनरेटेड एंड कंज्यूम्ड इनसाइड द सिस्टम, उसके कॉस्ट गिरते रहते हैं. इसका मतलब एक्चुअली आप पोल्यूट भी कम कर रहे हो. आप एक्चुअली आप 3 1 टन के अलग बॉयलर लगाओ और एक 3 टन का बॉयलर लगाओ विथ 70 to 80% एफिशिएंसी, आप एक्चुअली कम पोल्यूशन करते हो, क्योंकि आपका वो जो कोल बर्न होता है हायर लेवल पे. तो एक्चुअली में दिस इज फैंटास्टिक. पीपल हैव नो आइडिया. एटलीस्ट टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री में ये कितनी मदद करेगा डोमेस्टिक स्केल पे. इट इज
And
अनबिलीवेबली गुड.
and they have factored in the textile industry, automobile sector to start with, because if we had to get on manufacturing, this is the areas we actually had to go with. Now if we take one code one by one, if I start with the code on the wages 2019 code, right, it's more or less to do with the salaries. Okay, now you're talking about a minimum salary which would be fixed by the states, which would be notified by the states in the next 6 months. They want to focus on the low wage workers here because there are several points. I'll just try to go one by one. But the important part here is, which also impacts the white collar workers, the IT workers, is the uniform definition of wages. तो अभी क्या हो रहा था, मैंने अपने एक दोस्त को फोन किया, वो आईटी कंपनी में काम करता है. मैं कहा, तो एक बात बता, तो अपनी सैलरी स्लिप देख. उसको नहीं पता था लेबर लॉ या कुछ ऐसा हुआ है. He didn't even care, which is natural. No one cares about policy. तो मैंने उसको बोला कि तेरा सैलरी स्लिप में, एंड आई अर्ज एवरीवन टू डू दिस एक्सरसाइज, एक ब्रेकडाउन दिया होगा कि तेरा बेसिक सैलरी कितना है, तेरा डीए कितना है, देन हाउ मच इज द कंपनी पुटिंग योर सैलरी अंडर एचआरए, हाउ मच ऑफ इट इज स्पेशल अलाउंस और अदर अलाउंस. So beyond the basic and the DA and the retainership allowance, the government is telling you, और कोई भी component हो, वो तुम्हारा CTC का 50% एक्सीड नहीं करना चाहिए. अभी क्या हो रहा है, बिकॉज द एम्प्लॉयर वांट्स टू सेव अप ऑन ग्रेचुटी या पीएफ कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस, वो स्पेशल अलाउंस इतना बढ़ा देंगे, एचआर इतना बढ़ा देंगे कि दैट बिकम्स 60 to 70% ऑफ द सैलरी, एंड द बेसिक एंड द डीए एंड्स अप ओनली बीइंग 25 to 30% ऑफ द सैलरी.
तो
एंड
इसका क्या
माइंड यू दिस
बोलेगा?
हैपन.
किसी ने लिखा है टेक होम सीटीसी विल रिड्यूस, दोज हु टेक होम लोन्स एंड डेट विल फेस हीट. इसका क्या जवाब है?
No, I don't think that is the case. If you're saying that, because that is the point I'm addressing. If you're saying that the PF and the gratuity will now have to be factored in when all those excluded components like your special allowances, your HRA will be now less than 50%. Earlier it was 70%. So of course, people would think that the employer will contribute more, so your taken might be impacted to some extent. But you have to look at the larger picture for people who are sort of in the 6 to 12 lakh kind of a bracket. जो भी घर नहीं खरीद रहे. His question is not wrong, but the government is looking at the majority, that the employers cannot sort of play around with the young employees by just making everything about special allowances and not taking responsibility when it comes to their contributions, gratuity, provident fund, medical allowance, things like that. So that is where the government has made one major change. It might impact take home salary for some brackets, but that's also not clear as to that will be how big a minority. It won't be a significant minority for sure, but it will be a minority, that's for sure. बाकी bonus का है, timely payment है. See again, deductions have been capped, no gender discrimination, mandatory written appointment letter, how the inspector comes in, how he'll inspect, क्या system रहेगा, fines का ये वो सब ठीक है. But if you've run a business, a lot of what has been introduced in the code wages 2019 part has to do with how the execution on the ground happens. Now you are talking about a minimum wage. That's great. The center is doing his job कि मैंने तो अपना काम कर दिया भाई. मैं तो कह रहा हूँ एक मिनिमम वेज होनी चाहिए. अब इंडिया में प्रॉब्लम ये है लेबर का कि आई एम एन एम्प्लॉयर, यू आर एन एम्प्लॉय, आई टेल यू that I need to hire you. You will say this is the minimum wage prescribed by the state, which again is very doable. Uh, how the market works, minimum wage उसमें cover हो जाता है more or less. But कोई backward state में, कोई economically backward state में, someone will be like, no, I don't want to pay that minimum wage. So that is where it will depend MSME to MSME. What if both the employer and the employer like, screw the minimum wage, just give me work and I'm happy with it. So that is the kind of exploitation that needs to stop, and that can only, sort of be understood once the execution on the ground happens. अब सरकार कह रही है तुम्हारे पास अगर कोई भी इंस्पेक्टर आ रहा है, जैसे टेक्सटाइल के लिए आता है, ऑटोमोबाइल के लिए आता है, किसी भी तरह का इंस्पेक्शन है, हम नहीं चाहते वो तुम्हें आते ही फाइन करे. हम उसको कह रहे हैं कि भाई तू 14 दिन ले, टेल देम, सजेस्ट देम व्हाट आर द रेमेडीज, व्हाट नीड्स टू बी फिक्स्ड, लेट देम फिक्स इट, एंड देन यू कम बैक एंड से इफ दे नीड टू बी फाइंड और नॉट. बट अगेन वी थॉट दैट विद द जीएसटी आल्सो, but the GST inspectors, you hear a lot of things about them. The finance ministry also has been told a lot of things about them on Twitter itself. So that also is a part of the execution on the ground. Appointment letters, sure. I mean, a lot of gig workers might benefit from it. A lot of people who are in the low range might benefit from it. But again, people who are on a salary of 20 to 22 grand, this is labor basically. This is labor that comes from states like Bihar, UP, even West Bengal. They are just looking for another $1,000 and they'll change jobs. Appointment letter from them is not something that they tie their future to. It's not something I will perceive as an appointment letter as. मेरे लिए appointment letter होगा, ठीक है मुझे शायद अगली job में दिखाना है, it's a valid proof that I was working here, blah blah blah. उसको इतना परवाह नहीं है. ठीक है, government wants to have a record or something, but it's just one of those things that will be lost in execution, is that my fear is. But the one thing good in this is how they're telling the companies, don't sort of play around with the salaries, do not play around with the components where you sort of hype the special allowance, HRA, all that nonsense. Keep the basic and DA at least 50% of the CTC. That's essentially what code wages bill is all about. But a lot will depend on how it's implemented on the ground. A lot will depend on how the state governments go about prescribing that minimum wage. Because when we think minimum wage, we start thinking America. कि वहाँ $18 या $20 जो भी per hour की minimum wage होती है, and then there are unions negotiating that minimum wage. Will we have that type of politics in India? I don't think so. Because even today there's a surplus of labor. Maybe 20 years from now, this all will make a lot of sense when we start to age as a country, when we reach a per capita where we don't have labor surplus. Remember, that is going to be a problem in the future, which we'll talk about some other day. But for now, it's all about execution. There will be MSMEs will be in a position to meet this, but I don't know how many MSMEs will actually honestly follow it. That is where the government will have to sort of create a mechanism where anyone who complains about a grievance, that grievance should be addressed.
Yeah, but okay, so somebody has come back and asked, do you think the government has done this after the recent state? अरे यार 3 साल से डिस्कशन चल रही है यार, कभी तो मतलब यार न्यूज़ भी फॉलो कर लिया करो. मेरे को मालूम है नंबर 1 नंबर पेज के बाद आप लोग ज्यादातर पढ़ते नहीं हो, मगर अगर आप इसको सीरियसली फॉलो कर रहे होते थे तो आपको पता होता था पीआईबी और ये सब में ये कंटिन्यूअसली डिस्कशन चालू था. यार हर चीज में एंगल क्यों ढूंढते हैं लोग? कोई मतलब
बट एक चीज
कोई एंगल ही नहीं है यार, वो इट जस्ट हैपेंड टू हैपन नाउ. सारी स्टेट्स इन्वॉल्व थी यार इसमें.
स्टेट्स इन्वॉल्व हैं, बट ऑन अ डिफरेंट नोट. आप फार्म लॉज की बात करें, आज किसने लिखा हुआ था एक्स पे कि तुम लेबर लॉज ले आए, तुम फार्म लॉज नहीं ला पाए. भाई, these labor codes were already sort of accepted and executed by the state governments. Just that now they are nationally there. It's a uniform set of codes.
They are all formalized under a rubric now. And how it happened is, if we were to explain it in a simplistic way, भाई पहले बीजेपी फ्रेंडली स्टेट्स पहले वो कर रही थी, फिर जब आप एक प्रूफ ऑफ जिसको बोलते हैं ना वर्किंग दिखा देते हो कि भाई ऐसे हो सकता है, उसके बाद धीरे धीरे हमने नेशनल कर दिया और कन्विंस कर दिया स्टेट्स को कोई आपका ही फायदा है, कोई नुकसान नहीं है.
पर ये जो क्वेश्चन आया था ना इससे पहले, दैट विल माय टेक होम सीटीसी बी इंपैक्टेड, ये है तो देखो लेजिट क्वेश्चन, बट अगेन वो भी एग्जीक्यूशन पे है. हाउ मेनी पीपल विल एक्चुअली गेट इंपैक्टेड? क्योंकि तुम्हारी
नहीं, ये भी
मेजॉरिटी
क्वेश्चन है कि इट इज नॉट अ लीगल, पता नहीं क्या टीम है कि टर्म है, मेरे को नहीं मालूम है। आई थिंक ये टीम नहीं हो सकता,
टर्म आई थिंक ही मींस
टर्म होएगा, एंड इट हैज नॉट बीन डिफाइंड बाय एनी लेबर कोड्स। डज दिस न्यू रिफॉर्म फिक्स द इशू?
it goes only as far as if fixing it that basic plus DA cannot be less than 50%. That is as far as that goes, because cost to company, each company defines its CTC in a very different way. My company, for instance, will say I'm not putting the medical allowance there. I can't challenge it. No, that's my company's rule. So these things are different. But ये problem जो कह रहे हैं, जो होम लोन वाला चीज बोला, वो आएगा, but वो कितना population है, कितने लोग हैं, वो अलग चीज है. But again, it's all about execution. This part, minimum wage, ये वो मुझे नहीं लगता that it will be that simple to execute in states like, say, with high industry density. That's where my worry is. Because
और किसी
MSMEs
ने
are not honest.
और किसी ने पूछा क्या ये ट्रम्प के पागलपन की वजह से हुआ है? नहीं भैया, ये 3 साल
नहीं
से
नहीं
चल रहा था। इट्स जस्ट अ कोइंसिडेंस। दिस रिफॉर्म हैज नथिंग टू डू विद ट्रम्प। जीएसटी रेट कट हैज एवरीथिंग टू डू विद ट्रम्प। सीधा बात बोल रहा हूं। जीएसटी वाला ट्रम्प चाचा को थैंक यू बोल देना, टैरिफ की पागलपन का। इसका कोई लेना देना नहीं था, ये बहुत टाइम से चल रहा था। और ये तो कुछ नहीं है, म्युनिसिपल रिफॉर्म। मेरे को अगर पूछो, आज न्यूज में लेबर रिफॉर्म है, मगर जो म्युनिसिपल रिफॉर्म्स गवर्नमेंट प्रपोज करी है, और उसको हम बाद में करेंगे क्योंकि उसको भी डिटेल में करना पड़ेगा। कि भैया, एक तो दुख की बात यह है कि मुझे लगता है एक हम ही 2 चमन चूतिए हैं जो इन चीजों के बारे में बातें करते हैं। पूरे देश को ही पड़ी नहीं हुई है। हम ही वाहियात लोग हैं, पता नहीं क्या है, कोई बात ही नहीं करता इनके बारे में।
नहीं, ये नहीं किसी को पड़ी, because people, again, the BJP also doesn't do a great job in telling how important these reforms are. I think only the Prime Minister tweeted about it, and I think Mansukh Mandaviya ji tweeted about it. That's about it. Or Home Minister might have tweeted about it. But वो कार्यकर्ता, real spokespersons, ये सब नहीं करते, which is wrong. But again, the most important code with respect to an employer is the Industrial Relations Code of 2020. This is where it starts getting very, very important. And the main provisions I'll take up, the threshold required for the government permission for mass layoffs, पहले 100 लोग था, अब 300 कर दिया. ठीक है? And that is very, very important, because what was happening was that companies were saying, look, we are not going to hire more than 100 people or more than a certain number of people, because when it comes to firing them, and layoffs happen, mass layoffs happen, you don't know what a individual is going through while running an MSME. Business is shut every day. Sometimes it's not the external factor, sometimes it's just bad business decisions. And you going to a government for permission because of mass layoffs and then being hijacked by the trade unions, I think that was something that was worrying a lot of people. And this provision does away with it. It simply says up to 300 people, if you're hiring 300 workers, and it applies to factories, mines, plantations also. You do not need government's permission for mass layoffs, for retrenchment. Now, employers in large firms, especially in the textile and the auto sector, they are in a position to benefit from this. But the workers are saying कि भाई तुम हमारी लंका लगा रहे हो, पहले गवर्नमेंट परमिशन लगती थी, अब मास लेऑफ्स हो सकता है, government won't be involved. But here's the thing, here's what the companies are saying, and Kushal can probably chip in as a previous entrepreneur himself, as a former entrepreneur himself. They are saying we are anyway not hiring because of the आके clause previously, कि हमें लगता था कि परमिशन लेनी पड़ेगी, हम फंसेंगे, trade unions will screw us over. We were anyway afraid of hiring. Now at least we are in a position where we can hire, where we can have a mechanism where capitalism wins. If things are going good, they are going good, and we'll want to ensure they are going good. But if they are going bad, they will go bad, and then it doesn't become a political issue. How do you look at it? I think it's a fair thing, because capitalism works like that. We hate it or we like it, capitalism works just like that.
Point number 1, भाई, I think most people have not done rounds in an average industrial area. ये क्या होता है हाल में, इंटरनेट पे बहुत सारे लोग टेक कंपनीज में काम करते हैं. आई एम नॉट पुटिंग देम डाउन, आई लाइक टेक, बट क्या उनकी है ना एक बड़ी ऑर्गेनाइज सी वे ऑफ थिंकिंग होती है. उन्होंने ना कभी एक मैन्युफैक्चरिंग यूनिट नहीं देखी, एक छोटी यूनिट इंजीनियरिंग की जिसमें लेथ मशीन होगी, 5-7 लोग काम करते हैं, एक आदमी उठाता है, ऐसे रोल डालता है उधर से उधर, फिर उधर से एक जोरदार गाली आती है, जल्दी कर करके. उन्होंने कभी ये देखा नहीं है, या कोई टेक्सटाइल की यूनिट या वीविंग यूनिट, या मतलब बेसिकली जो रियल हार्डकोर काइंड ऑफ मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इंडिया में होती क्यों नहीं है. एक, worker nahi milte. You don't even find workers in India. Okay.
Yeah.
You go around Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation, Gujarat Industrial Development Corporation, you go to Haryana, you go anywhere across the country. The one board in different regional languages along with English that you see cutting across the country is workers needed. It is a standard demand cutting across the country. In Maharashtra, they will be like helper paije, worker paije, kind of in Marathi. And boss, manufacturing is tough. There are two-pronged reasons. एक तो worker वैसे ही नहीं मिलते, कम मिलते हैं. And manufacturers are now paying more and more. In fact, I tell so many young kids that if you really want to get into making more money, look at manufacturing as a genuine option, not tech. Look at manufacturing, you will have more job stability and you will actually rise. If you are highly skilled, तुमको लगेगा क्या है, मैं घटिया काम कर रहा हूँ छोटी स्टेज पे. बट इफ यू आर हाईली स्किल्ड, वो सेट है ना छोटी यूनिट का, वो तुमको बहुत जल्दी ऊपर पहुंचा देगा अगर तुम स्किल्ड हो. और तुम इतना सीखोगे जो तुम कभी कोई ऐसे व्हाइट कॉलर जॉब में नहीं सीखे अपनी लाइफ में. ये मेरी बात मेरे पल्ले बांध लेना. मैं अपनी खुद की फैक्ट्री में भी जमीन पे बैठ के काम कर चुका हूं, इसीलिए मैं बोल रहा हूं मैं सबसे ज्यादा मेरी लाइफ में सीखा मेरे फैक्ट्री के फ्लोर पे, और किधर नहीं सीखा मैं. और वो भी मेरे वर्करों के साथ बैठ के मशीन चला चला के. मशीन भी चलाना आता था. बट ये एक साइड है. दूसरा साइड क्या है, जब ऐसे घटिया वाहियात लॉज होते हैं ना, तो मेरे जैसा जो ओनर होता था वो वैसे ही नहीं बढ़ाता था अपना बिजनेस, क्योंकि मैं बोलता था मैं अपने पैर पे कुल्हाड़ी क्यों मारूं. सो दिस इज अ विन विन. इसमें कोई वर्कर राइट्स के ऊपर हनन नहीं होने वाला है. भाई साहब, आप थोड़े रियलिस्टिक बनो. यहां पे अगर आप ये नहीं करोगे तो ये एक तरफ बोलते हो इंडिया में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग नहीं आती, दूसरी तरफ अगर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग लाने के लिए जो करना है वो नहीं करते. यार दोनों तो नहीं हो सकता ना. तुम यू कैनॉट हैव a Kerala model for India. I am sorry to say, there is a reason why Kerala has no industry. There is a reason why Bengal has no industry. Workers of the world, unite is not the solution. It doesn't mean you become a blood-sucking vampire and you suck the blood of innocent workers. No, but it means it has to be a complementary system with checks and balances. And what the government is proposing over here is good. अब मैं तो टेक्सटाइल से निकल गया, पहले आता था तो बहुत अच्छा होता था.
यार देखो, इंडिया में बिजनेस करना आसान नहीं है. आई थिंक दिस इज नो सीक्रेट. पीपल हु हैव डन इट, पीपल हु स्टडी the way of doing business, they all will vouch for it. But labor is a challenge. What exaggerates this challenge is the trade unions. This is the most contentious part of this entire four codes. If any protest happens, I don't think it will happen, but if any happens, or if some loony left union calls for a protest, it will be only because now the government is saying you want to negotiate, form a trade union which has the support of over 50% of the employees, 51% of the employees. अभी क्या चलता था कि एक बैंक है, जैसे पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक है, मर्जर की सिर्फ बात हो रही है. ये होता था. आई मीन, आई हैव सीन पीपल पुट अप ऑन व्हाट्सएप स्टेटसेस, the finance minister randomly comments somewhere that we have to look at mergers for the next 20 years, something she says. Suddenly 10 different unions will come up and announce strikes, and bank strikes happen in public sector banks. You all know that. Now the government is saying, look, if you want to negotiate, have one trade union with over 51% of the support. Unless that happens, we are not negotiating. It's very good. You have manufacturers who want to really scale up operations. Pehle they were worried about the part where they had to go to the government for layoff permissions, or it becoming a trade union issue. Now the government is saying, look, we are trusting you to run your business as you wish to, hire as many people as you wish to, upskill if you wish to. But when it comes to trade unions, we're also empowering the employer, not the employee. Because a lot of us do not know, it's no longer popular in the literature we consume every day on X or in the news. India has been hit by trade union strikes. We were a textile, I mean, the city Kushal comes from used to be a textile hub. The state of West Bengal used to be a textile hub, one of the largest in the world. What happened? The left loonies took over. They all took over. And it's not just textiles, I mean, it's across industries. These trade unions in Bengal, for instance, I think they tell that Dunlop story very, very often, that how it was a British-owned company, then the It was taken over by an Indian brand, had over 7,000 workers. I have it in my notes here. And across the 80s, all that happened was strikes. And strikes of the extent कि तुमने वहां के लोगों को लॉकअप कर लिया, एम्प्लॉयर को बंद कर लिया. क्या डिमांड है तुम्हारी? वेजेस 400% बढ़ा दो. अगर 100 रुपए वेज है तो 400 रुपए कर दो, 500 रुपए कर दो. I mean, think about this. If you are being paid 10,000 rupees, for example, a month, can you even sit on a strike and say, I want 50,000 as my next month's salary? It can't work that way, right? The company has its own cash supply, cash flows. Doesn't work that way. But that is what was happening across the 80s in West Bengal. And Dunlop's story is very, very famous. I think everyone should look it up. How the people, the left government was actually enabling all these strikes. And there were around 72 illegal strikes in 12 months. So every week there was a strike happening. The plant manager used to be gheraued in some cases for days. Machinery worth crores and crores was stolen. And this is the legacy which we have sort of created for our business groups. So today, when people say why everything happened to China, why it did not happen to us? Because the world was also looking at us in the 80s and the 90s and seeing what we were doing with the industry we had. We were going completely bonkers left. So that stops now. Number two, the new code also says that now you have to give a 14-day notice for a strike. Now, the ones who want to go on a strike, they will go anyway on a strike. But this sort of makes it very difficult to have those instantaneous strikes, which earlier used to happen. वो भी एक चीज है. There has to be a 14-day notice, up from 6 weeks in some cases. So that's a different law now. And strikes would be considered illegal without any failure of conciliation. They will get the 54 wages for 14 days if the strike is called off. So anyway, the government again is favoring the employer here. So the most contentious part of these four codes, and this is what you'll hear from the likes of Yogendra Yadav also in his sweet, meeky voice, that, oh, the industry is not now
किसका नाम ले
favoring
लिया
the
तूने?
slow wage
मुंह
workers.
कौड़ा कर दिया तूने मेरा.
क्या? अच्छा, I heard something else. I thought you said Koda. Okay. So
इतना
this is the
घटिया
most
वाहियात
contentious.
इंसान है, सबसे इरिटेटिंग आदमी है वो.
हाँ, अभी कोई कह रहा था कांग्रेस ने उसको पिंक स्लिप दिया, बट अगेन कमिंग बैक टू द कोड, उसके अलावा नोटिस फॉर स्ट्राइक, उससे अलावा कुछ नहीं है. देयर आर there is the fixed term employment contracts that are being now expanded to even the temporary workers. The worker definition has been expanded to include contract laborers. So that is where also the gig economy comes into play. Penalties have been simplified. So more or less, this is about empowering the smaller MSMEs. Remember, our MSMEs faced from two problems, and one I'm still waiting to be addressed in the way it will be addressed. Nirmala ji, in her budget speech, I think it was last year, she said, last year as in 2024 के elections के बाद जो budget हुआ था, कि we will have the banks designing a special way how to give credit access to MSMEs. Because the way banks deal with MSMEs right now, with the kind of paperwork they want, the kind of things they want, mortgage and stuff like that, that's a bit unfair to the MSMEs, right? And that is why MSMEs prefer taking money from the market as a loan. वो आपस में ही भाड़े पे ब्याज पे एक दूसरे को लेंड करते हैं. So one thing she made a very good point about was that we want the banks to lend more to the MSMEs. It helps formalization and things like that. That part really hasn't worked out yet. I'm sure it's still being worked on. The second problem was the labor. Now, ask anyone, Kushal can probably watch for it, anyone even employing 20 people in a small manufacturing unit. It's not a simple job. I mean, a kindergarten teacher has better shot at controlling 20 kids who are just all over the place, but an entrepreneur will have a harder time controlling 20 labors, because some days they are just missing because someone has offered them 500 or more rupees for a month. Some days someone is missing because they just don't want to work. Someday there are so many festivals. Some just go back home into the villages and disappear, never to come back again after months and months of training. So being an entrepreneur is difficult. And then the government tells you, you can't lay them off. You cannot do that. That is where it becomes a headache. So this part of the code, it eases it out. It dilutes the power of the trade unions while retaining the rights of the workers. And at the same time, it further empowers MSME along with everything that is being done.
another very important thing that most people are not willing to consider, how much it means for a businessman, and it helps the person that is being employed by the businessman to work in that company, is the decriminalization of 65 sections after these labor codes come in, because those 65 sections had thousands of compliances that were used consistently by the bureaucratic class, especially at the state and municipal level. Because remember, labor is very much a state issue. More than a central issue, it is a state issue. And all the state governments that used to use these laws, and wo jo ek latakti talwar hoti thi that would lead to jabardast corruption, is now going to reduce. यार आपको खुशी नहीं होती है, मतलब करप्शन कम होने वाली है इस देश में? These things, for the record, should have been done in 1950s, 60s. 2025 में हो रहा है ये. फिर लोग
वो
बोलते
भी
हैं
5
चाइना
साल
में सारी
डिस्कशन होने के
मैन्युफैक्चरिंग क्यों
बाद.
चली गई. लोग बोलते हैं हाय जापान में सारी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग क्यों चली गई. ओ भाई, इसके लिए गई, वो लोग का फंक्शनिंग ब्रेन था. उन्होंने रियलाइज किया हमको इंडस्ट्रियलाइज करना है तो हमको ये लॉज बनाने पड़ेंगे. Tushar said something very important in the beginning. He said we have Sweden like laws in a piss poor country.
With China
we
like
are
ambitions.
the epitome. Yeah, we are the epitome of बड़ी बड़ी बातें वड़ा पाव खाते.
Yeah.
मतलब क्या हो रहा है भाई? We pretend to be what? We want Sweden level facilities in a country like India. भाई, get real. कभी अपने घर के बाहर जाके देखा है? एक्चुअली घर के बाहर के निकलोगे करते रहोगे, नहीं तो घर के अंदर भी खांसते रहते हो अगर एयर प्यूरिफायर नहीं है तो.
Now, this is one part I want you to sort of put your perspective to, because you live in two different continents, two different hemispheres. Okay. People do not understand that the way logistics works in India, that the way their Amazons and their Flipkarts and their Zomatos and Swiggies, the way they work in India, with the kind of efficiency they work in India, driven by the kind of surplus labor we have, willing to deliver orders for as little as 25 rupees per order, that is not something that happens in the West. So, before we come to the next code, the third code, which is the part where the gig workers actually win big, please sort of tell, for the education of the viewers at large, how difference is, if I look at from a perspective from an Amazon order, how is it in Canada versus how it is in India? Because you also tweeted about it a few days back.
भाई, इट इज वेरी, देखो तुम अपने आप को अगर अपनी लाइफ में कभी टॉर्चर करना ना, तो उबर ईट्स कभी कनाडा में ऑर्डर करना, तुम्हें पता चलेगा कि तुमको कितनी फास्ट डिलीवरी की. हाउ मच इंडिया स्पॉइल्स यू, this gig economy. You have no idea. You live outside India to realize how much the gig economy spoils you in India. Everything is so slow. अच्छा, और अपने आप को अगर परम टॉर्चर करना है ना, तो कभी गलती से मेरी बात मानो. I think everyone should go through this. They should make a call center call to some company in the West. It doesn't matter who is on the call, Indian, Filipino, white person. They will make you go through, like, मैं पहले हंसता था, मुझे लगता था मेरा भाई फेंकता है, मगर मेरा भाई बोलता था जब भी मुझे कॉल सेंटर में कॉल करना होता है ना, मैं 3 घंटे का स्पेयर टाइम लग के कॉल करता हूँ. मतलब मेरे को लगता है ना मेरा भाई फेंक रहा है. फिर मैं उधर गया, मैं भी अभी 2 घंटे स्पेयर रख के फिर ही काम करता हूँ. अगर मुझे कॉल करनी है 2 घंटा, प्रेस दिस बटन, प्रेस दैट, ये करिए, फिर वो आएगा, फिर वो बोलेगा ये डिस्क्लेमर पूरा प्ले करेंगे अगर तुम इंश्योरेंस रिलेटेड कॉल कर रहे हो. फिर तुम ऐसे है ना बहन के टके के जैसे बैठे रहोगे. हाँ हाँ बोल, अच्छा तुम कुछ सुन तो रहे नहीं हो, तुम्हारी अटेंशन तो है नहीं उसमें. फिर तुम लास्ट में यस झक मारा के बोलने वाले. वो इतना टॉर्चर करते हैं ना तुमको. ये ओवरऑल जो एक वहां का सिस्टम है ना, क्योंकि एवरीथिंग इज टाइड इन लीगलीज इन द वेस्ट, राइट? एवरीथिंग इज लीगलीज. And then they have just created these things around legalese. It is so frustrating. In India में क्या अपने को fast चाहिए भाई, cuff drops चाहिए, 10 मिनट में आना चाहिए. And it spoils you. And one more thing. Yeah, अरे नहीं आया तो लोग गाली देते हैं, ये तो लेट क्यों आया?
अरे, I tell you, I remember a few years back when I was in Swarajya, I remember I had written an article which said you Zomato then had promised a 10-minute food delivery. And it's like, किसको चाहिए भाई? नहीं जल्दी थी तो मेरे को गरम गरम खाना आराम से 20-25 मिनट में लाकर दे. फिर एक था कि there is a 10-minute delivery promise for groceries. And I was like, who the fuck needs it? But then that was 4-5 years ago, okay? And even Jaggi had written a piece then. Today, if I make an order on Blinkit, okay, I get it literally in 5 minutes because the dark store is located what 500 meters from where I live. Now, this is the new reality of NCR. This is the new reality, I'm pretty sure, in Mumbai too, and several other metros. Bengaluru obviously works completely on these gig workers. But what protection do these gig workers really have? Not
No,
much.
but before that, I also wanted to show this chart, which was shared by a Twitter user. This is very
हाँ
interesting. So very good यार, ये तो बढ़िया चीज है. पहले 5 साल
हाँ
का
दिस
वो कट
ऑल्सो
ऑफ
इज अ
होता था
पार्ट.
ना
हाँ हाँ अब 1 साल का हो गया.
यार. ये किस हिसाब से प्रो वर्कर नहीं है ये रिफॉर्म? ये तो प्रो वर्कर ही है ना रिफॉर्म. आप इधर से उधर भी जा सकते हो. सी व्हाट दिस डज इज दैट इवन इफ यू मूव फ्रॉम कंपनी ए टू कंपनी बी, यू गेट द फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी ऑफ हैविंग द बेनिफिट्स while changing jobs. You don't need to be stuck for 5 years. At the same time, this is the pro worker side, and the pro company side is कि भाई अगर आप useless हो तो कंपनी आपको less than 300 एम्प्लॉइज है तो आपको निकाल भी सकती है.
सही है ना. ग्रेचुटी का तो सही है. पीपल अब प्रॉब्लम ये है, मेरे को लगता है कुछ व्हाइट कॉलर लोग क्या करेंगे ना, हर 2 साल में ग्रेचुटी निकाल के आईफोन खरीदेंगे. तो आई डोंट नो हाउ दे विल गो अबाउट
तो लोग वियर्ड है.
इट.
लोग वियर्ड है, उसका कोई इलाज नहीं है. मगर यार
हाँ
दिस इज Nick, every law is not going to be perfect. That I'm
नो
willing to concede. It's not
नो
perfect, but boss, this is like मनीष सबरवाल का न्यू इंडियन एक्सप्रेस में एक अच्छा ऑपेड आया है, वो पढ़ो. इट्स नॉट परफेक्ट दिस, बट दिस इज अ जाइगेंट. भाई अरविंद पनगरिया जैसा सीनियर इकोनॉमिस्ट अगर किसी चीज की प्रशंसा कर रहा है ना, एक तो वो सर के मुंह से किसी की तारीफ करना भी बड़ी मुश्किल होती है. अगर वो कर रहे हैं तो जाके सीरियसली लो. अरविंद पनगरिया उसकी तारीफ कर रहे हैं इस चीज की.
नहीं
मतलब
तो
अरविंद
ग्रेचुटी
पनगरिया
देखो.
की जिंदगी इसी में निकल गई. हाय हाय, ये कब होगा?
नहीं हम ना कहते हैं कि मोदी गवर्नमेंट सोशलिस्ट है. इट्स नॉट राइट द वे इट सॉर्ट ऑफ ब्रांड्स इटसेल्फ. एंड दैट
पर
हैज बीन
नहीं
द
है,
डिस्कशन. बट
मगर कोई भी
नहीं
गवर्नमेंट
नहीं नहीं
इंडिया में
बट
नहीं है
बट
ना.
No, but BJP is the closest that comes to it. So a government actually believes, trusts the right kind of right government will trust the businesses to do what they deem fit and the workers to what they deem fit. So a government won't say, नहीं तुम 5 साल तक gratuity को हाथ नहीं लगा सकते, तुम खर्चा कर दोगे, तुम saving नहीं करोगे. They're like, do whatever the fuck you want to do. It's your money. I don't care. It will tell the employees also, do whatever the fuck you want to do with your business. I don't care. My job is to enable that you the conditions where you can do business. My job is not to run your business for you. That is what the prime minister is also always stressed on. अब ये boring चीजें हैं. Probably a lot of us haven't followed that part, but the prime minister since 2012, when he used to write these wonderful Facebook posts, those were the days when he was more active on Facebook than on Twitter. And he used to talk about minimum government, maximum governance, and things like that. And he used to always sort of imply that the government's job should be to enable the conditions where business can be done. So this reforms also should be seen in that manner. If you look at the third quote, which is the social security gratuity after 1 year, that's great. Gig and platform workers are finally being recognized, and these are around 2 crore workers. That's a big number. मतलब आज की डेट में आपका 2-2.5 करोड़ एस्टिमेटेड गिग इकोनॉमी में है. 2030 तक के नंबर्स दे आर एस्टिमेटिंग इट टू गो टू 3.5 crore approximately. We don't know how to look by 2040, because if you talk to certain entrepreneurs today who are in manufacturing and stuff like that, they're saying a lot of people now prefer to work in the logistics industry also, hyperlocal services also, because they find it better. They find it working on their conditions. They can make equal money or probably more money on busy days and stuff like that with the tips involved. So they also have their perspective that gig economy is now a serious competitor to labor, hiring labor in the traditional industry. but they are not protected. So now what this code does, it gives them all the benefits after they register on the eShram portal, which again, the government has been advertising a lot. It's a portal for informal workers, for workers in the unorganized sector, and workers just need to register there with their Aadhaar cards, and they get a unique number, and then they become eligible for a host of, for an array of benefits. Interesting thing is now the welfare fund that will be set up, and this is where again the state governments come into play. जो भी एक गिग वर्कर्स के लिए होगा, इनके लिए हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस बनेगा, जो भी एक फंड क्रिएट होगा, वो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट लेवल पे क्रिएट होगा. इसमें सरकार ने ये चीज कर दी कि अगर फॉर एग्जांपल जोमैटो का साल का टर्न ओवर, नॉट प्रॉफिट, टर्न ओवर 10,000 करोड़ है, फॉर एग्जांपल हाइपोथेटिकल नंबर्स, दे हैव टू पे समवेयर अराउंड 1 to 2% to the state welfare fund, which is will be organized for the gig workers, and that will be then used by the state to sponsor all their funds and whatever care they need to take. On the health insurance part also, the state will be a major mover, as it does with the Ayushman Bharat Yojana and everything else. But this is an interesting thing, and even the gig companies, the Zomatos, are coming back and saying, yeah, for sure, we have already factored this cost. The discussions were ongoing. We don't see a problem in this. So I think this is
they
very
have been
good.
having discussion with the gig economy companies for the longest time. Yeah, they
Huh.
were all
So there is one.
gradually brought on board, and the figures were discussed. And when they agreed on the figures, it was announced. Like, it is a win-win for everyone. भाई इमेजिन कर, तू अगर गिग इकोनॉमी का पार्ट है और तेरे को आज एक प्रोटेक्शन मिल रही है, हर्ज क्या है भाई? It's amazing.
नहीं, हर्ज क्या, आप ईश्वरम portal also has now a lot of registrations. I think some government estimated at around 300 million, if I'm not wrong. But I'll just check that number. एक बार फिर से. 300 million it is. Yes, organized workers as of October 2025. I don't want to get that number wrong. तो आप ये देखो ना, कितने लोग वुडवर्क से बाहर आ रहे हैं, that we need to be protected. And what you're protecting against? You're protecting them against medical costs, you're protecting them against unpredictable accidents. अभी क्या है, काफी इंश्योरेंस होती हैं, जीवन ज्योति योजना, सुरक्षा बीमा योजना सरकार करती है, ये सब ई श्रम में आता है. अब इसमें क्या है, जैसे कोई गिग वर्कर है, कई बार आप देखते हो कि कोई सामान डिलीवर करने जा रहा है ना, ही इज फॉलन ऑन द रोड, ही इज मेट विद एन एक्सीडेंट, ही इज इंजर्ड. Companies earlier used to say this is not our headache, or they used to have a very defined mechanism of how they used to address these issues. Now there is a proper responsibility on the company, because companies kya thi, chalu thi, they are not our employees, they are our partners. I'm not saying that was wrong, okay? That is how the business operated, fine, companies should decide. But now they're saying you have a certain responsibility towards the gig workers. This is what we're asking of you, and I think that's a fair ask. If the states are sort of working with the companies, creating a fund where the gig economy workers can be protected, I see no harm in it. So this is what this third code is majorly about: protecting the gig economy workers, giving them all the benefits, but majorly, most importantly, recognizing them that they are employees, which was not done until now.
मैं टेक्सटाइल से हूँ. देखो, women were not allowed to do night shifts in textiles. In general, कोई भी इंडस्ट्री में अलाउड नहीं थी. बस हम probably textile is the most labor intensive industry of India. News flash for those who don't know, उसमें automation beyond a point कितनी भी कर लो होती नहीं है, कर नहीं पाते हम लोग. So उसमें क्या होता था कि if you are not allowing women to work in the night shifts at times, you're cutting them off from a large chunk of the hiring process. And now that this labor code bill has solved that issue, ये भी मदद करेगा, especially in areas where women's safety is not an issue. In those areas like southern India में it is not that much of an issue. आप देख लेना कितना फायदा होएगा इसका. मैं आपको अभी बोल रहा हूँ, as a textile entrepreneur, you mark my words, this will help our industry that I was formerly part of. This is another thing that I want to say. It's a very good, very, very good initiative. If people have not paid attention, this is one more thing I want them to pay attention to.
The part about allowing women to work at night, look, in white collar jobs, women are already working night shifts. And when it comes to factories, I think more than the MSMEs, I think the state has to guarantee their right to work at night. If they're working in a manufacturing unit, sure, the MSME can give them pick and drop facility and stuff like that. But you, in at least your metros, have to create a law and order situation like that, where women do not feel threatened going out. Because A lot of women would also be entrepreneurs. A lot of them might be running cloud kitchens or whatever. अभी जैसे ONDC evolve कर रहा है, I don't know how e-commerce will evolve. And another reform, the government is not talking about it for some weird reason. They're just not talking about ONDC. And this was the time they should have actually spoken and linked it to the codes they have brought in, that how ONDC framework also sort of strengthens. So एक वो चीज है. But I think when it comes to women workers and them working 24 hours, the state needs to do a lot more than just sort of guaranteeing or allowing it. The state needs to chip in and say, okay, this is how we want to
Police
expand state
patrolling,
capacity. हाँ,
police patrolling
पेट्रोलिंग कितनी बढ़ेगी?
in industrial
uh,
areas.
हाँ, I mean across the city, because women have to commute from their homes, and that might not be an industrial city too. So that is where I think the state has to take a lot more responsibility, because होता क्या है, sometimes unfortunately one crime happens and it scares everyone, and it will naturally. You don't want that. So what can the state do? It has to be proactive. That is where I think the point about women workers in 24-hour shifts becomes very, very important.
I understand, and I actually accept the point is taken. Ki I think police reforms are also, and one of the biggest things in police reform is actually people think हमारे यहाँ बहुत ज्यादा cops हैं, बहुत ज्यादा bureaucrats हैं. भाई नहीं, हमको actually हम लोग काफी अंडर गवर्नड कंट्री हैं in many areas. हमें और पुलिस की जरूरत है, and I wish we increase those things. अगर हमने ये सब कर दिया, आई थिंक यस पुलिस, नहीं तो क्या होगा में तुषार, बड़ी कंपनियां होंगी ना, वो बस सर्विस करेंगी जहां पे जाके वो विमेन को लेके आएंगी और प्राइवेट
कर ले
सिक्योरिटी हायर करेंगे, वो सब होएगा.
कर ले मैं तो कह रहा हूँ ये भी अच्छा बिजनेस है, अच्छा आइडिया, अच्छा बिजनेस है. Someone starts a service, a transport service which works between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. specifically targeted towards women employees. Why not? But again, even for that transport service to flourish, the state has to sort of chip in with greater number of force. अब दिल्ली जैसे शहर में पेट्रोलिंग होती है, 24 घंटे होती है, बट दिल्ली शहर कितना बड़ा है वो भी तो देखो ना. How can such companies, private sector companies, work with the state institutions, law enforcement agencies? Because at the end, we are just not talking about building an economy, we are also talking about enabling a condition where working at night is no longer sort of this taboo. कह रहे नहीं नहीं रात का शिफ्ट नहीं करना है. अभी बहुत बच्चे वाइट ये पुणे जैसे शहर में, बेंगलुरु जैसे शहर में 10 साल से कर रहे हैं यार, कोई ऐसी बड़ी चीज नहीं है. But I'm talking about MSMEs who want to probably move their manufacturing 24 hours. I'm talking about, plants that might employ 10,000 people but are still struggling to employ women at night because of certain local issues. Those things I'm talking about. White collar में तो call center में तो क्या 20 साल से लोगों को देख रहा हूँ मैं नाइट शिफ्ट्स करते हुए.
है, but I genuinely feel textile will benefit a lot if women were like, if this is like created in a proper manner, because that is a genuine struggle in textiles, because I think there are a lot of efficiency issues, and in certain departments I just think women are better than men in textiles, and a lot of textile companies genuinely struggle. They genuinely struggle. Like I think women would be far better in fabric checking and stuff like that. ठीक है, ताका उठा के टेबल पे लाना वो एक हेल्पर कर देगा जो मर्द है, उसमें स्ट्रेंथ इन्वॉल्व है, ज्यादा स्ट्रेंथ इन्वॉल्व है, FYI. मगर उसको चेक करना, वो जो उसमें फाइन नुआंस चाहिए उसमें, आई थिंक जस्ट विमेन चेकर्स टेंड टू बी बेटर देन मेन इन माय एक्सपीरियंस.
A lot of people actually say that they prefer hiring. This was a wonderful story. I think it was about Foxconn or Wistron. I don't remember correctly, but that hiring women in the manufacturing unit actually also increases the productivity. They said they are not ones who will go on a sutta break, or they won't require long gossip breaks and stuff like that. That was one story I read. So a lot of companies actually want to hire more women. It's no joke, it's for real. But wahi hai na, the biggest element disabling more participation is the local dynamics, the local culture. कई बार आपकी मेट्रो बहुत एक प्रॉस्परस एटमॉस्फेयर होता है दैट वुमेन कैन वर्क इन नाइट एज दे डू इन मुंबई. अभी तुम्हारा वहां फिल्म इंडस्ट्री 24 घंटे चलता है, सब 24 घंटे काम करते हैं, ठीक है. बट अब उसी चीज को तुम लखनऊ में इमेजिन करो, या आगरा में इमेजिन करो, या तुम उसको मध्य प्रदेश में भोपाल, इंदौर में कहीं इमेजिन करो, या कलकत्ता में इमेजिन करो, वो इतना स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड नहीं होता. सो द पॉइंट हियर इज, लेट्स टेक दिस 24-hour culture across India. Let's start with the big metros, let them be an example, then move on to the second tier cities, and eventually it will trickle down.
Yeah, let's hope for the best. I think these are the overall good things that I have.
And the last one is mostly about the safety, health, and working conditions. So that is where I think there will be uniform rules, the coverage threshold, working hours standardized. अब देखो, जैसे सरकार कह रही है तुम मैक्सिमम 8 घंटे काम करो दिन में. अब द वर्क आई डू, वेयर आई डू, आई कैन टेल यू 8 घंटे एक दिन में नहीं हो पाता हर रोज. किसी दिन 6 घंटे में भी हो जाते, किसी दिन लगते हैं टाइम. अब ये चीजें you can't sort of frame them and say कि नहीं 8 घंटे मतलब 8 घंटे.
I think it's understanding between the employer and the employee. यार
employee.
Every company
So,
में यार कितनी बार होता है मेरा वर्कर आता बोलता है साहब मेरे को आज 4 घंटा जाने दो ना, मैं कुछ बोलता भी नहीं था, बोलना तू जा यार. और किसी दिन होता है यार तू 1 घंटा रुक जा प्लीज काम कर ले, तो वो 1 घंटा रुक भी जाता था ना. ये अंडरस्टैंडिंग
ठीक है. हाँ, तो बाकी सब प्रोविजंस बेसिक हैं, बट मेनली यही है कि काफी चीजें सारी एग्जीक्यूशन पे आएंगी. बट व्हाट मेक्स मी हैप्पी अबाउट दीस कोड्स इज द ट्रेड यूनियन पार्ट, द गिग वर्कर पार्ट. These two, I think, things are going to really sort of help people in India, because we like it or not, there are a lot many people who have now joined the gig economy. They like it. They say it gives us freedom to work whatever we do. भाई लोग अलग entrepreneurial हो रहे हैं. एक आदमी दिन में रैपिडो चला रहा है पीक आवर्स में, ऑफिस आवर्स में, उसको फिर जब पीक आवर्स नहीं है उसको खाना डिलीवर करना है, और बीच में वो एक लॉजिस्टिक्स ऐप पे भी लॉकडाउन है, वेयर ही इज enabled himself to deliver parcels across the city. So gig economy में ये भी चीज है that there are people who are working with 3-4 different companies, and that might also happen in the future. So I think that is also one thing. Let's see how it works out.
इमेजिन करो अगर वो वर्कर्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड यूनाइट वाले होते थे और वो तुमको फंसा देते थे किसी एक कंपनी में, तो ये तुम नहीं कर पाते थे. और यार एक इंडियन एंटरप्रेन्योरल स्पिरिट होती है, इट गिव्स यू अ सेंस ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस कि भाई ये मेरी गाड़ी है, मैं चला रहा हूँ, मैं इसमें अपना कर रहा हूँ, मैं घर में लाख रुपया लेके जाऊं, 50,000 लेके जाऊं, तू कौन होता है मेरे को बोलने वाला? मेरे को मेरी गेड़ी लगानी है ना, तू कौन है मेरे को बोलने वाला? ये लोग यार, पीपल हु हैव नेवर felt financial independence in the entrepreneurial sense na just don't get it. Especially lefties and communists, they're the most annoying
lefties
people
will protest against this. I'll be surprised कि lefties do not protest against this. I'll be surprised. I mean, if it's not made a poll issue in West Bengal, because थोड़ा बहुत जितना बचा leftist vote है 2-4% आ जाएगा.
अरे but she also agreed ना.
She agrees to a lot of things on GST also.
वो खुद के अगेंस्ट ही प्रोटेस्ट करेगी क्या?
फिर राज्यसभा एमपीज उसके कुछ और आके बोलते हैं. लेट्स नॉट इवन गेट स्टार्टेड, यू नो द काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स आई हर्ड अबाउट.
जिस पार्टी में मैडम जी और वो दूसरा वो जो डेफमेशन जिसके ऊपर हरदीप सर ने मारी थी, ऐसे लोग हैं ना. मैं उस पार्टी, हाँ वो मतलब मैं वो आशुतोष की मीम, मोदी जी मुझे माफ कर दो, वो मीम है मेरी इस समय. लेट्स टेक अ फ्यू क्वेश्चंस एंड रैप इट अप. डू दीस कोड्स अप्लाई टू फार्म लेबर? आई डोंट थिंक सो. No.
Why MSP?
Yeah. Hello, Tushar and Kushal. Do you think the land reforms and regulatory reforms that Gautam Chikkarmani was working on with the government are going to be introduced since the labor laws have now been implemented? I'll have to ask. I think उतना कोई प्रोग्रेस हुई नहीं है उसमें. Honestly, what I hear is कि थोड़ी डिंग डोंग हो गई है. But I have no confirmation, so let's see. क्या ये? I know of people, many took loans and living with just 10,000 savings maximum per month. Recent boom post-COVID addicted people in debt for stock market and F&O, and home purchase habits is decades old.
I don't know what he wants to say, but he is saying that people are living on the edge when it comes to their cash flows, which is true for any country. It's not just an Indian phenomenon. You look what happened in America in 2008. मतलब fine, you want to single out, but इसमें फिर सरकार क्या करे ना? अब किसी को अपना पैसा जैसे उड़ाना है वो सरकार उसमें थोड़ी घुस सकती है. मतलब
लोग चाहते हैं कि सरकार आके थप्पड़ मारे क्या तुमको? ए तू खर्चा करता है, हरामखोर, तू खर्चा करता है, ये तो क्या है? मतलब मेरे को समझ नहीं आता यार, तुम्हारे को कितने बाप चाहिए? नहीं
अभी वो आते हैं ना ट्विटर No, that's what, there's an economy on X now. People say, did you buy an iPhone? No, don't buy an iPhone. invest that 1.5 lakh in an SIP, which will give you 12% return. So what if you'll be without a phone and no one can ever contact you? You'll have more money.
नहीं नहीं मैं बोलता हूँ ना, मैं वो गोपी किशन का सीन था ना, मेरे दादा बाप इंडियंस ने उसको सीरियसली ले लिया मेरे दादा बाप, मतलब क्या है, स्मार्ट मूव बाय द गवर्नमेंट, इंक्रीज इन पीएफ अमाउंट, देन गवर्नमेंट क्रेडिट एंड एक्सेस टू पीएफ मनी विल इंक्रीज क्या लोग कहाँ से एंगल निकालते हैं ऐसे, मतलब
बट
ये
एंगल
एसीपी
एंगल अच्छा
प्रद्युमन
है,
लेवल,
एंगल अच्छा है। नहीं नहीं,
एसीपी
एंगल सही है
प्रद्युमन
उसका।
लेवल एंगल था ये
बट एक बात देखो ना, एंगल तो गलत नहीं निकाल रहा है वो।
So there is another major reform in banking sector in 2025. RBI has decided to allow Indian banks to finance M&A.
Okay, we have to read up more on that.
Yeah,
Sure.
I have no clue. मैंने ये लेबर रिफॉर्म्स के बारे में पढ़ा है, तो मैं उसके बारे में बात कर सकता हूँ। और कुछ मैंने छोड़ा था म्युनिसिपल रिफॉर्म्स का, भाई मैंने बोला कि वी विल स्टडी इट एंड वी विल टॉक अबाउट इट सेपरेटली। अदर देन दैट भाई क्या है, एक आदमी बोलता है गंभीर के बारे में टेस्ट मैच कोच। भाई ये लेबर रिफॉर्म्स की पॉडकास्ट है, तू इसमें भी गौतम गंभीर को ले आया, कुछ तो शर्म कर।
बट भाई आज गुवाहाटी में मैच चल रहा था ना, सुंदर तो लग रहा था, मतलब with the blue sky and the clean air, you could, this was I think the best I have seen in India for a long
भाई
time
आज
now.
जो
It was,
ट्रेविस हेड ने किया है ना, भाई तुम कैसे इंडिया का मैच देख सकते हो? जो ट्रेविस हेड ने किया है आज, वो क्या था, ये क्या हो गया, 2 दिन में मैच खत्म हो गया।
I think Travis Head has something with November. There is this screw everyone November he has. November आता है, he ends up screwing
भाई
us,
भाई
he
भाई
ends up
भाई
screwing England.
आज मैं पूरा दिन विनम्र के साथ पॉडकास्ट रिकॉर्ड कर रहा था, तो मैं उधर ही था, तो मैं मैच नहीं देख पाया। मैं छुप छुप के मैच देखा बीच बीच में। अभी मैं पूरी भड़ास निकालने वाला हूँ बैठ के, मैंने देखना है सारे डिटेल्स। एक क्या क्या, नो क्वेश्चन, जस्ट अप्रिसिएशन फॉर योर चैनल, लर्न अ लॉट टिल नाउ, यू एंड तुषार आर बेस्ट ऑन पॉलिसीज। थैंक यू वेरी मच यार। कोई तो सोचे हम लोग इतनी मेहनत करते हैं ये चीज के पीछे, हर टाइम कोई पॉलिसी का आता है, तो प्रॉब्ली आई एम probably now the most consistent podcast in India that discusses policy and reforms all the time, and not, you know, on a large philosophical ऐसे होना चाहिए, ऐसे होना चाहिए, ये करेंगे तो ये होगा, नहीं नहीं, not theory but actual practical reforms। वो theory में ही लोग अपनी जलेबी बनाते रहते, नहीं तो
It's a subtle commentary on both of us at on a Saturday night. We are choosing to discuss a policy no one in the mainstream media is. So it's a commentary on us. I don't know good or bad, but it is what it is.
no, but I think it's a commentary on the rest of the country that I'm glad आज विनम्र ने मेरे साथ podcast record की दोस्तकास्ट पे, we are discussing, it's a very baseline level, but nobody's interested, boss. The one thing that affects your life the most, nobody's interested. सबको बस क्या एलियन आपकी गाय चुरा रहे हैं उसी लेवल का डिस्कोर्स है
That's why I also started with a Substack, na. So I created a Substack earlier this week. It's called Polity
yeah, and I've
Policies.
added it in the description, by the way.
So I'll be writing a lot there for my love of writing, and probably even doing some stuff there on videos, because YouTube, I don't think it's really working out for me. So I think Substack is the way to go, where I can actually pen my thoughts. Because होता क्या है ना, अभी ये जैसे 5 साल से डिस्कशन हो रहा है लेबर लॉस पे, अभी मैं हर ट्विटर पे 6 साल से चिल्ला रहा हूँ कि पोल्यूशन जो है दिल्ली में, उसका सोल्यूशन ये है, ऐसे ऐसे एक स्टेप लेते हैं, लेट्स स्टार्ट थिंकिंग टुवर्ड्स दैट। And people don't realize these things are building up for a long time. I mean, believe it or not, the government is 11 years old now. There are a lot of things that are in process that will suddenly now evolve. You look at with GST, and there is no way to archive these policy issues. You know, news media mein policy nahi aata. I mean, I have to scan through Business Standard and ET, you know, every day to just find some very interesting breakdown on policy. But ab nahi aata. कम हो गया वो, तो we have to start creating these archives. So I also sort of request everyone, I'll just tweet out also, just subscribe to that Substack.
Yeah, so his Substack link is there in the description of the podcast. So whether you're listening to the audio version or you're watching this on YouTube right now, on both the platforms, I have added the link to the Substack. Go subscribe to his Substack, read where he's writing in detail. Also, you can follow Tushar on X. You can follow me on X. You can also buy my book. You can join the membership program of the Cārvāka podcast, whether on YouTube or on Patreon. You can also send one-time donations through UPI, whatever. See, the aim of these discussions, like, I could choose the running outrage of the day and garner 100,000 views, 200,000 views. Honestly, it's the most meaningless existence that I can have as a human being. It makes no sense to me. Like, it's so boring. I rather have 15,000 quality views on a podcast like
Yeah.
this than 200,000 views on क्या यादव ही यदुवंशी थे,
ये कहाँ
क्या
था?
हिटलर ही हरियाणवी था.
No, I'll tell you
So
something else. There where we are as a nation right now. A lot of interesting things are going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years with respect to our economy, with respect to our infrastructure, and there is so much to be written about, so much to be discussed. I don't know why we sort of have reduced, why we as in the country at large, reduce ourselves to an outraging machine that every day we'll outrage and then we'll go to sleep, next morning wake up and wait what to outrage about. It's the vicious loop we are caught in. I think that is what we need to come out of. Again, it's not a, we are discussing
therapeutic.
policy on a Saturday night, so
It's therapeutic. Outrage is therapeutic.
a wrong
That
way
is
to
the
go
crux.
about
Yeah. So clearly, you and I don't need therapy.
it.
That's the only conclusion. And on that
Ah,
very positive note, we will end today's podcast. To
yeah,
everyone who tuned in this late, we want to thank all of you. We did not want to make it more than an hour so that you can consume all the information. And here's what I will encourage each and everyone to do. All the links to the bills are available on the internet. Just Google the 4 bills, download them, read them, whether you like them, dislike them, in the comment section. If you could do a thorough reading and then start commenting on them under the comment section, then maybe that could also increase the visibility and others can get interested, because that's the only way that we are going to change our lives in this country, when we start having decent discussions on policy proposals. Keep this trend going. I'll leave you guys at that. Until then, I'll see you next time. Tushar and I will do a municipal reforms podcast also,
yes.
but let more details come out on it. But until then, all of you take care. Bye bye.